Do you find dehydrating just a little stinky? I know a lot of people do. So I'm here today to give you 5 tips to make dehydrating a little less stinky for you. Hi, I'm Darcy and I want to be your dehydrating BFF to help you develop a big, full pantry full of dehydrated goods for your family to use whenever you need it. So today, let's talk about how to reduce the stink and dehydrating for those foods that are notorious for being pretty stinky when you onions, mushrooms, dark leafy greens like kale, collard greens, mustard greens, turnip greens, those kind of things sometimes have been called like musky gym foot. Broccoli, cauliflower, liver, one of my favorite do not dehydrate inside the house ever. But there are a lot of foods like that can have a real stink to them when they're drying. So to help out, I'm going to give you 5 tips to reduce that smell whenever possible. It will never take away the smell, but it will help reduce. So first off, when you can, things like onions are great if you start them from frozen. Freezing it helps reduce the smell overall, and all you have to do is open this and pour it onto a tray and you're good to go. There is no prepping for it. You don't have to cut it up. You don't have the crying. And if you have some tips on how to stop that crying when you're doing onions, leave those tips down in the comments below. But you don't get it on your hands, you don't smell up the house just from the prep. Open it, start to dehydrate it. It won't take away the smell of onions, but it greatly reduces the significance of that odor. A second tip is blanching. For the same way with the onions, if you happen to have a bunch of fresh onions and you're working with them, you can blanch them first to help reduce the smell that's going to happen in your dehydrator. Sometimes I caramelize my onions because I really love the flavor of that. I do it in my slow cooker. I'll leave a link to that video right up here so you can learn how to do it. That will help reduce the dehydrating smell of doing onions, but remember, caramelizing onions is also going to put a smell in the air of your house, but I find that I like that smell, so that's okay. And if you didn't know, blanching orange slices can help reduce the bitterness so that when you eat them, it's not quite so bitter. All right, another tip that a lot of my followers will do is that they will actually put their dehydrator in another room. Maybe a room closed off that's a guest room or a food storage room, someplace that you're not in all the time. Some even crack a window if possible to allow that air circulation to pull that smell out of the house. I happen to dehydrate in my laundry closet. We keep the dehydrator on top of our dryer. And with the doors closed, it's still right here in our living space, but it is less pungent when I'm drying something. Now, something that we do notice that when we are in the room all the time, after a couple of hours, you tend not to notice the smell anymore. You just kind of get used to it and you don't notice it. But if you leave, get some fresh air, and then come back into the house, sometimes, depending on what you're drying, can be a little pungent, but you will get used to it pretty quickly. It's just that first rush. Our next tip is using your hood vent in your stove. So part of the problem in dehydrating, the air just kind of hanging in a room, you want to be able to move that air out. And this can be helpful, especially with apartment dwellers, that you don't necessarily want that smell to permeate the walls into other apartments. But the only way this tip will work is if your vent hood is actually venting out into the outside, not just into a dead space in your house. So you put your dehydrator on your stove, protect it if you need to, if you have a glass top stove, or if you have gas burners that you need to put something flat so that your dehydrator can sit stable. Turn on your vent hood. Then crack a door or window near you, because that allows the airflow that will make the vent hood work more efficiently and pull that air up and out of the house. It doesn't mean that you're going to get rid of the smell, but it helps reduce what sits in the room. It's actually pulling it out and out of the house. And my last tip is to actually dehydrate outside your house. You can use your garage, you can do it outside. The first thing I'm going to say is check the manual on your dehydrator. It may tell you not to dehydrate with this outside. What that means is they're protecting themselves from liability, that if you have a bad circuit outside, that it doesn't create a problem, that if it rains and you don't remember to bring your dehydrator inside, it's a liability issue for them, so they're protecting themselves right off the bat. I use my Nesco plastic stackable dehydrator, and I'll use it out on my back deck, put on a couple of cinder blocks just to get it off of the wood. Not that it's going to be a problem, it's just what I prefer to do. It also helps circulate air around it. I do that mostly for onions and peppers. I like to keep them outside because both my father and I have lung issues, and it helps reduce the effect on us to have those really pungent things outside where it won't bother us. But also if I was doing liver, like I said, I would never do again. But now that we have a dog that lives with us, we'll be doing liver again. But it's going to be done outside the house, not inside, because we find that smell horrendous. But it will be done either in the garage, or it'll probably be done in the garage, because that way at least it's protected from any kind of animals thinking, oh, look, that's meat. I've never had a problem with animals attacking a dehydrator while I'm running anything, but when I put meat in there, probably going to keep it in the garage where it's protected. So those are my tips, but I would love to hear from you. What are some of the tips that you use to help keep your dehydrating smell less pungent in your home when you're trying to dry foods? I know that people have a lot of smell sensitivities, that some things bother them more than they bother the general public, and that's a personal thing that you just have to work with what works for you and your family. But hopefully these tips will help reduce that effect on your family and help make dehydrating a little easier for you. So I hope these tips help you be able to expand your dehydrating repertoire by being able to do things that are a little more stinky and not have as much effect on your family. Now watch this video right here to learn some more tips about dehydrating that will help you out. And until I see you again next time, remember, nevertheless, she preserved.